Hello everybody, welcome back at another video of class 10th from the book Footprint Without Feet. And so fortunate that this chapter name is also Footprint Without Feet. And the title of this chapter is very strange or very um, not able to understand, but let me tell you that here the meaning of the title is that there were some sign of footsteps, there were some footprints of there were some sign of footstep, but that actually the feet were not visible, but their stamp, their prints were being observed in the land, in the mud land, but that their feet was not able to seen by anyone. So what type of strange or mystery it is, let's talk about in this chapter. So before starting the chapter, let's read that what is written here in this paragraph. Can a man become invisible? This is the story of a scientist who discovered how to make himself invisible. Does he use or misuse his discovery? So now, have you ever seen a person who is invisible, or have you thought about it? Yes, we have seen many people in the comics, in the storybooks, as well as in the movies. But in reality, it's very hard to believe. But here, it happened in London, where a person whose name was Griffin. He was by profession, he was a scientist, and he made a such type of medicine. By eating it, a person can be invisible, a person can be disappear, a person can become a transparent. As we have seen the glass, that glass can be seen from across, everybody, like what's going on out after it, that everything can be seen through the glass. So same thing is being here. A person whose name was Griffin, he had swallowed some medicines, some drugs, and he got become invisible. And the question is that what did he do? He, whatever the power he got, did he use in a right way or wrong way? Did he take the advantage of his discovery? What happened in the story, we will cover it. But before telling you, my dear students, uh, the story, the reading, the explanation, let me talk about some incident where something happened in this story. First of all, this is a footprint without feet, the invisible man. This is a novel which comes in 11th class, and this is a short version. This is a short story. It's not a full story. The climax is not in the story, but in the whole, there is a whole big novel in 11th class. So if you want to go through by the first story, you can go through it, but it's there are many interesting facts you are going to know about it. But let me talk to you, my dear students, that we haven't heard about any medicine, but we have heard about the timing machine. That there is a machine, a kind of a door or a kind of a box in a form of ATM machine. We have seen such type of boxes there where a person enter, or there is a sometime we have seen in movies that there is a chair, a person sit at the chair, and there are many lights were there, many bulbs were there, and some like wires were there, many buttons were there, everything runs by the remote. And along with this chair, there are many two three also equipments which is placed to this chair. And by doing this, the person just play the button, and the person got disappear, and he, whatever he wants to go, he can go. He could go in past, he could go in present, he could go in future as well. As so there are many stories that we have heard about it. But what's special in this story, that the CBC had taken in our course or in our syllabus. Let's talk about it. So here, before explanation, just go through with the question. How did the invisible man first become visible? That how he got visible after becoming invisible? Why was he wandering the streets? And what was the reason that the scientist, the person Griffin, was wandering in the streets, were roaming here and there in the streets of London? Now here, actually, the story begins. What happened? The two boys were playing, or were doing some work in their backyard, in their playground, what they found, they found that in the muddy land there were some fresh footprints, signs were there, some prints were there of a foot, a man foot, and it was looking that the man has recently gone through. But as they have been playing here for a long period of time, so they couldn't see anybody. So they got that, they found that they, definitely some invisible man, some supernatural powers had run away. The two boys started in surprise at the fresh muddy imprints of the bare feet. Bare feet means naked feet, without slipper, without shoes, a bare feet. So the two boys got surprised to see the fresh muddy imprints. Imprints means the sign of bare feet. What was a barefoot man doing on the step of a house in the middle of the London? So the question came in the mind of the two boys, that what a person who is walking with barefoot around the London, what he is doing here, and where was the man, and where this man had gone. As they gazed means looked, as they gazed, and a remarkable sight met their eyes. A fresh footmarks appeared from nowhere, and they got stuck, they got shocked, and they were there were some remarkable, some extraordinary sights were there that they had met with it, and they don't know where these footprints, foot signs, where they have come from, they don't know. Few further footprints followed, and they continuously pursuing the footprints. They were continuously going back on these steps, where they could see that where that prints can lead them. So they continuously followed it, one after another, descending the steps and processing down the streets. And after that, what they found, that these prints were going downwards and where to the streets. The boys followed, fascinated. They were so attracted, they were so delighted, until the muddy impressions become fainter and fainter, and they were continuously following the footsteps, and after a while, when these footprints reached towards the streets, they got fainted, they got disappear. The explanation of the mystery was really simple enough. The bewildered boys, and now the writer is saying that the explanation of these two boys who were so shocked, just because of they didn't know about anything of this piece of things. The explanation of the mystery was really simple enough. The bewildered, my dears, the scared boys, the two fearful boys, the two surprised, shocked, or stunned boys were continuously following the scientist who had just discovered how to make a human body transplant. And actually, they do not know to whom they were, like whose footprints were these. The reason, just because of there were no men were visible, that they couldn't see anybody who is walking around here. But actually, they do not know, they were not aware that there was a scientist who had discovered how to transplant a man, or how to disappear a man, how to make a person invisible. They were not aware about it. So Griffin, the scientist, had carried out experiment after experiment to prove that the human body could become invisible. So here there was such a passionate, such a devotee type of scientist who were extremely, had gone to the deep of the bottom of an experiment, that the experiment was on how to make a person invisible. He was just making drugs to eat it, and the person can be hidden, that the person can be invisible. So he had done many experiment after experiment, but in number of experiments where he got failed. But finally he swallowed certain rare drugs, that very important word, lines. Now here, finally he swallowed certain rare drugs, and his body become as transparent as a sheet of glass. Now here, my dear students, what he did, how he got become invisible, he eat some certain drugs and swallowed it, some certain drugs, and his body become transparent as a sheet of glass. You have seen the sheet of glass, it is so transparent, and through it as remained as solid as glass. Now, how the body was looking of this person, how the figure was categorized, you could understand that you have seen the mirror in your house which is attached to the window, that you can see that a person can see from outside inside the inside the room, and the inside person can see the outside, like this is a transparent window. But here the human body also becomes same. As now I was standing in front of you, you don't know what is behind me, whether it is some words are written, so you are not able to look at it because you can't see through my body, because my body is had taken a big size, a size which is not which nobody can see out through with my whole body. So but his body was like a piece of mirror that you can see the whole things behind him. Even some chairs were behind him, if even some books were behind him, because everything was visible through his whole body. You have seen such type of scene in many movies, especially Iron Man, that he has a kind of a button on his wristwatch. When he played it, then there kind of a computer window just start up in front of him, and he just putting his he just push some buttons on the virtual image of a computer, and just making his target, completing, sending the information, and getting the information through this a virtual a picture. And the good thing is that it was visible, the picture was visible, but you can cross your finger through this picture, this virtual image. So a such type of body was there. But here in this picture, in this computer shared picture, you can cross you can cross through the picture, but here in this body you cannot go through your finger through his whole body, because this body was as solid as a glass of sheet. Yes, we can cross anything through the glass because it's so solid, but yes, it is a transparent, but it is solid as well. So same thing was there, that the human body, that the griffin body was as strong as a glass, and as transparent as a sheet of glass. So you have to keep this thing in your mind, this whole 2-3 lines, how it was pretending like that. Brilliant scientist, extraordinary scientist. Though Griffin was rather a lawless person. Very important paragraph. Lawless person means a person who was disobey the law, who was not going according to the law. A person who has been caught number of times doing some offensive activity, that is called lawless person. His landlord disliked him and tried to eject him. Now the Griffin was living on a rent house. His landowner had been continuously disturbing him, had been continuously disturbed by him, because there was some reason he didn't like this person, he didn't like Griffin, and he wanted to eject him, he wanted to abandon him, he wanted to take him away from the house. In revenge, Griffin set fire to house. So in this revenge means, my dear, badla. So he had been insulted by many period of time, by a long period of times. Now it's time to take the revenge, as he become invisible. So he came here to take the revenge. How he took the revenge? He set the fire to house. So what he did, he just burned the house where he was living. To get away without being seen, he had to remove his clothes. Thus, became a homeless wanderer, and that is the reason he became homeless wanderer, because he had set a fire on his own house, and he was got naked, so he couldn't be visible to the other person, that who is the real culprit, who is the main accused, who set the fire in that person's house. So he removed his all clothes and become invisible, and that is the starting point, that he become abandoned. He became out of the house, out of the shelter, and compelled to live in the streets of London. Wanderer means a person whose work is roam here and there to look for shelter, to look for food, without clothes, without money, and quite invisible until he happened to step in some mud and left footprints as he walked. And now, finally, what he did, this person had no money, the scientist had no money, no clothes, and he was a homeless and quite invisible, and that's why he was roaming here and there, and that's why his footprints were visible at the mud, at the muddy area, at the muddy land, which were being observed by the two boys earlier we have mentioned, we discussed in the first line. He escaped easily enough from the boys who followed his footprints in London. And now he is telling about that these two boys who were following me, I could easily escape from their riches because they couldn't find me, they couldn't see me as I was invisible. But his adventure were by no means over. So what happened? So first, how we can say he was a lawless person, as the first reason we have come to know that he took the revenge from his landowners who continuously who dislike him and want to eject him, and that is the reason that he set a fire on the house of landowner. So he escaped easily enough for the boys who followed his footprints in London, but his adventure were by no means over. But his adventure was not over. It started. It's the beginning of his adventure. He had chosen a bad time of the years to wander about London without clothes. So he had chosen. He had made a such type of drugs in the time of winter. So whatever he was doing, it was happening in the winter season. Now he had burnt his house, and now finally he had come to the road. And this is very critical. This is a very cold area, cold time, where he had spent his whole day and night in the streets of London. The air was bitterly cold. Bitterly means extremely cold. He could not do without clothes. Instead of walking about the streets, he decided to sleep into a big London store for warmth. Now, as he was a person who was habitual of living inside the room, now he had become a person of a road vendor, and now he had finally thought that today I am going to stay in the big store of London and get my body warm, as the outside too much chill is there, too much cold is there. Closing time arrived. Now closing time of shop of this mall. As soon as the door was shut, Griffin was able to give himself the pleasure of clothing and feeding himself without regards to expense. Now here what happened? Finally the Griffin had reached inside the store, and now Griffin was so happy, so pleased that he could have clothing, feeding himself. He was so hungry, so he could he ate a lot of things, and without paying any regard, without paying any single penny or any money. He broke open boxes and wrappers and fitted himself out with warm clothes. So what he did, he broke open boxes and wander here and there in the mall, and in the night time he wore, or he had some clothes which were totally fit for him and make him warm. Soon with shoes, an overcoat and a wide brimmed hat. Now what he had taken from the shop, a big hat, a coat, a big shirt, or shoes as well as. Soon with shoes and overcoat and a wide brimmed hat, he became a fully dressed and visible person. In the kitchen of the restaurant, he found cold meat and coffee. So now, when he wore the clothes, and he was looking little bit visible, but before wearing clothes, he was totally looking invisible. Now, what he did, he just reached at the grocery area, where he took the cold meat and coffee, and he followed up the meal with sweets and wine taken from the grocery shop, and have he had also some sweet as well as a wine bottle. He just taking the enjoyment or taking the pleasure of this store. Finally he settled down to sleep on a pile, on a pile of quilts. Quilts means, my dear, rajai. So here what happening, finally, after eating too much food, after having full enjoyment drinking, now finally he found that there were some pairs of quilt. He just went inside it and have his body warm. If only Griffin had managed to wake up in the good time, all might have been well. So, what the writer is saying, if the Griffin would wake up in the right time before opening the store, as it was, he didn't woke up until the assistants were already arriving next morning. But he was, after a long period of time, he had a very soundful sleep, so he couldn't control on his sleep, and he was lying down on the quilts in the store. And before the arriving of the supervisor, of the assistant of the store, when he saw a couple of them approaching, he panicked and began to run. And when he found that somebody is trying to catch him, so he got intense and ran away from that place. They naturally gave chase. In the end, he was able to escape only by quick thinking of his newly found clothes. Now, here what happened? The shopkeepers, the assistants were thinking that we will catch him very very easily. But what happened? They couldn't catch him because he got invisible. He got just disappear. And shivering with cold, he hurried to Derry Lane, the center of the theatre world. Now, finally, after leaving the store, he had reached towards the central or theatre world, which is at the road of Derry. Lane means, my dear students, street or road, and the name of the street was Drury. And he reached in this theatre world. He soon found a suitable shop. He made his way invisible upstairs and came out a little later, wearing bandages round his forehead, dark glasses, false nose, and big bushy side whiskers, and a large hat. And what he, after reaching in the theater, in the theater hall or in the theater class, what he found that there were many clothes, many things were there. So he used everything to hide his whole face, hands. So in his face he wore many bandages and spectacles and bangles and a false nose and a bushy big mustache. He just put it on his face, as each and everything were available in this shop, in which theatre world that was situated at the Derry Lane. To escape without being seen, he casually attacked his shopkeeper from behind. So as he wanted to leave the place very silently, so what he did, he, with unmerciful, without heart, he attacked on the shopkeepers from behind. After, with his robbed him all the money he could find. So the Griffin had stolen all the money as far as he could find, and now he had left the place. Now the question also what we have found: how did the invisible man first become visible? The invisible man first become visible in the store of London, where he was being eating some foods and having some books, and at the same time he wanted to his body warm. He wanted to make his body hot, so he wore some suits, some clothes were hanging on the handle, and he just wore it. And that first time he was being observed by the people, or he was being seen. Why was he wandering the streets? There was a reason, as his landowner didn't like the Griffin, and he wanted to make him away from the house. And in this lust to take the revenge, he just uh, he just set a fire on his landowner house, where he was living as a rented person on his house, and that is the reason he was wondering, because he didn't have any place to live in it.